It's 4:03, so we'll go ahead and start. Recognize the presence of quorum. Paige let me know he wouldn't be here. We have a whole room full of distinguished celebrities. We won't bother with introductions. Okay, first item on the agenda is that I actually did prepare minutes of our previous meetings.
Ooh, you did good.
I did.
You did good.
It was something to do on the flight from Japan.
Yeah, when you couldn't sleep?
Yeah, whichever time that was. Prepared the minutes of the December 14th, 2017 meeting and the minutes of the January 11th, 2018 meeting. If you could just take a minute and read them through, they're not very long. And having looked over the minutes, are there any corrections, deletions, omissions, changes?
I move we accept the minutes for December 14th
I'll second.
and January 11th.
There's a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, call the question. All those in favor, aye. Aye. Opposed? There being none, the minutes are approved. And the next item on the agenda is discussion of, I have copies of the agenda, by the way, if anybody doesn't have one.
I don't.
I do, Chuck. I'm good.
Police jurisdiction, last meeting, we had a fairly robust conversation about the pluses and minuses of maintaining the police jurisdiction as is or shrinking it down to conform with the city limits. I had Will had prepared some numbers, and without going into all the different topics we talked about, it seemed fairly overwhelming from the discussion that it would be probably better to leave the jurisdiction the way it is rather than shrink it back. And whether you did that on a kind of a service basis, the quality of service and so forth, or on an economic basis, it seemed in both cases more prudent to leave the jurisdiction the way it was. But we left it open, and Will, there were some numbers that you were going to try to get.
We tried to, we asked for them, but we never got them, about the revenues that came from the courthouse that the city got, and the fines, what percentage of the fines that the city got from the police department, and what that revenue percentage was. We never got that. I never got any information about that, and I'm not sure it's even enough to even consider for the decision, other than it was just a curiosity point on my part as to what those revenues were. I couldn't find anybody within the city or that was here that night that knew those figures. And then another one was the property tax. outside the city limits. And I come to find out, I did find out later from ex-mayor that the city gets nothing from the county for property tax, even though the city provides services to the county in the police jurisdiction. And I was just wondering if there was any application that could be made to where you could recover some of the property tax from the county, whether it be 1%, 2%, whatever it could be, just to help pay for some of the services that were provided to the police jurisdiction, people that were in the county. Now, I don't know if that might be a state law, it might be, that might be governed by state law, I'm not sure.
I think that's what they were talking about. They thought maybe that it would have been, but I thought they were going to let us know.
Yeah.
Like you say, if there
Yeah.
was a method to do that, or if that had to be a vote of the entire state legislature to make it.
Does anybody know that?
Questions.
Hmm?
I mean, we will not get anything from the county. The only income we get from outside the city is the stuff that nobody reached out to me, or I would have given it to you.
Now, is it a state law that determines that?
Yeah, I mean, yes, state law governs what income you can get from the police jurisdiction. And I had that in the slide that I presented, that I wasn't aware that y'all were talking about this today, so, and nobody reached out to me for questions.
Mhm.
I would have gotten you all the information you wanted.
Well, the two ladies, Jill and who else was here? We asked him to look into it. Of course, I didn't get
Jill?
here. Get Jill and what was that?
The revenue.
Revenue officer?
And nobody reached out to me to get with them either.
Okay. Well, we asked them if they could get the information for us, and I never heard anything, so.
That's because you probably didn't go through me. I can get that information for you, I already had it.
But it is state law that determines the tax.
I mean, the county has their property taxes that state, I mean, the county approves that, and then, of course, the city, and Jack's here, he can, help with this, but the city property taxes that we charge are the maximum millage that can be charged, governed by the state.
Mm-hmm.
So we can't increase there. I outlined the income that we get from outside the police jurisdiction and income we receive inside the police jurisdiction. And then Lieutenant John Hamrick put together a percentage of basically what's happening in the county as a percentage of their time and expense and the other. But again, I'm happy to give you all that information. There just hasn't been any communication.
Well, we got most of it,
Yeah.
Mayor. We did get some charts and information. He was asking one very specific question as to whether or not we even keep track of if someone creates, let's say, a traffic citation and goes to court. Is it recorded whether that person is in the city and not, and if
John
so?
Hamrick is the one that gave all that information,
Okay.
and, I would appreciate it, and you said this in the first meeting, if you would reach out to me for the information, I will put you in touch with the people that have the information, and we would save a lot of time. And then I'm also in the loop on this, since this is something that I'm working on as well,
Mhm.
so.
Okay. Do you think it's important enough to hold off making a recommendation on this, or?
Well, if it could be done legislatively to where the cities would all get together and try to get their legislators to change to get a percentage of the county property tax, the ones that are providing jurisdiction coverage, that might be a a big number, but it would have to be done through the legislature.
Yeah. But in the context of what we can control right now.
No.
Okay, all right. So, as a suggestion, and let me know what you think about this, between now and the next meeting, could you write up a summary of the discussion points we had talked about? And then we could essentially have a draft of a final report?
Sure.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And then we'll just hold off taking a vote until we have that report then next time.
Okay.
Yeah, all right, good. Okay, let's move on to the next topic, which is beginning to look at natural gas, utility, major capital projects. Richard, the floor is yours.
And we talked about putting together a request for qualifications.
Right.
And I've got a draft
Pardon me.
set up that I still have to do a few edits with. But in the request, I've broken it down into some mapping considerations for, to be able to prepare plans for one thing, to replace the cast iron gas, but for other things we can use down the road, one would be modeling the gas system. And part of that, you know, we had a little bit lower pressure on County Road 1 with this cold weather than we had anticipated, and then in Rock Creek we had a little bit of problem with some pressure at one end of it. And so having models available will help us look at an economical opportunity to address that issue.
So we can address the, not just the low pressure distribution, but the capacity
Correct.
kind of
And
issues.
so that would work out.
Yeah, yeah.
And in this proposal, the scope, I've extended the anticipation of cast iron replacement from the 3-year window that I'd like to have tried to get it done into a 5-year window. And so we'll be looking at project schedules that would base the priorities on class locations, which basically, you know, determine the population within a certain radius of a gas line as you move along, you know, the right of way that it's installed in. And then there's some other issues that can deal with specifically cast iron replacement. One of those would be the impervious surfaces within the right of way where, you know, if there is a rupture, the gas would migrate. And because it's full of pavement, sidewalk and building, the outlet typically would be in a building, you know, from a utility line that would be a plumbing line or some other type of service to the building. So we would establish priorities based on that too.
A couple questions that came up, I forget when, but in any event, one of the comments that I think you might have made was that if you have a cast iron pipe in direct connection with a steel pipe, not cast iron,
Correct.
that will cause the steel pipe to corrode as well as the cast iron. Is that
Well,
correct?
All the steel pipe on the gas system is cathodically protected. But once it gets to a point where, in most cases, it's going to be a regulator station that will reduce the pressure from the 200 pounds on the high-pressure distribution system to maybe 25 pounds, or we use 17 pounds a lot here too, but on the low-pressure distribution side, which is where the cast iron is. So once you extend cast iron off of the steel, the gasketing and the cast iron construction doesn't allow the cathodic protection to go all the way through that distribution system. So when you add a galvanized pipe for a service, then it's basically unprotected. So you have to do some leak surveys on an annual basis to validate that they're still active. And oftentimes we spend time and resources putting anodes on those lines to protect them since they are unprotected steel. And when you extend from a cast iron system with steel, then you have which I don't know that we've fully identified the amount of unprotected steel gas mains that are in the ground too, that are an extension of the cast iron. But, you know, and I would say back since probably the early 90s, we've been using polyethylene pipe for our low pressure distribution system. So everything that has been built since the early 90s is going to be polyethylene pipe, and these issues won't exist for that type of system.
So if I have a cast iron pipe directly touching a steel pipe, then is it?
Yeah, and it's not a dissimilar metals type of issue.
No, but you said that steel pipe then is not cathodically protected.
Correct.
All right. But if I take out the cast iron pipe
Right,
and replace it with something,
correct.
then
You'll
will that-
replace the steel service with a plastic
Okay.
service.
All right.
Yeah,
So
we'll be replacing.
You'll get rid of all of the
Yes,
corroded pipe.
Yeah, it won't be just replacing the mains, it'll be replacing the
That's
service.
what I'm trying to understand.
Yeah, we'll have to do that.
But Richard, didn't you say the other day that we really aren't doing those inspections like we should be on maybe those joints or those places? Or was that something else we're talking about?
Well, we're trying to do.
Like we're 2 or 3 years behind on,
I can't tell you that we're behind on anything. We do have annual leak surveys that we take, and you know, I haven't had the opportunity to evaluate where we are with that
Okay.
from a DOT regulation
okay. All right.
standpoint. But-
Maybe I
But we
misunderstood.
are moving toward a third-party leak survey so that we can, you know, have a full report and understand where issues may or may not be.
Okay. I may be thinking about sewer.
So,
I
now
can't-
the
I
issue-
can't remember.
And that's the issue is trying to look at continuously upgrading the transmission capacity of the sewer system, and being that most of where you're gonna wind up starting is close to the plant, and when you wind up starting to expand out that transmission capability from the plant, you'll be in a lot of right-of-ways that have cast iron gas mains. And so what I was hoping we could do is incorporate the addition of added wastewater capacity with eliminating the cast iron gas mains and evaluating the storm sewer as well. So we're not talking about, we're talking about 3 individual projects that will be within one right-of-way that we'd like to be able to have some pretty good timing in terms of that right-of-way being under construction and everything getting done at one time.
Yeah, that was the other point I was gonna bring up, is that for the benefit of those of you who haven't been here at our other meetings, we wanna make sure that we make the point that even though we're gonna analyze each utility separately,
Right.
because that's the most straightforward way to do it, in terms of implementation, if there are overlays between any 1 or 2 or 3 of the utilities in
Right.
certain places, it'll be more beneficial and more cost-effective if we do all the surgery at one time.
Yes, so that would be.
Water, bury electric cable, who knows what, but all of it at one time.
The only thing that we could add to that may be if there are overhead power lines. that
Yeah,
we
yeah,
have
anything we might wanna
put those
do.
underground. So
Yeah.
all those would have to be.
But we have to start somewhere with the analysis, so we just picked the gas system to start with.
Well, and that's true about the gas system. What is also true is that we know where the transmission issues are with the sewer system from the report that we've had done.
Right.
So the only thing that would keep us from starting with that would be, I would like to look at the capacity or the condition of the gravity sewer line in those areas. And we do have a camera that hopefully will be approved at the next council meeting to start looking at the main sewer lines. And then we can also look at the storm drain with that camera, so we can make sure that we're putting the resources in, you know, the places that are needed to be put into the most. So that's what our goal is. And it's just hard to quantify, you know, what you're gonna find when you start identifying, you know, we've got potentially 85 or 90 miles of gravity sewer pipe that we need to look at, we need to assess. We'd like to look at the main roads first. We'd like to look at the Fairhope avenues and the section streets and the Morphe, so that if there's some issues that we can maybe hedge from further destruction and some type of other failure besides just, a sewer main that leaks water out when it rains. It may be could collapse or do some things like that. We talked about that
Right.
with the force mains.
And we talked,
discharging
in fact, I
the
think
manholes.
two of the other streets that came up were, one was Church and the other was
Church and Fells,
Fells.
that's the
Very-
intersection where
Yeah,
everything from the south side of town discharges into that manhole.
right.
And it's not a manhole that is easily opened because we hit it pretty hard and for a pretty long time with a sledgehammer, and we couldn't get it to move. So, and they've been asked, I've asked the crews to be sure we're able to identify any issues with that, and I'm hopeful that we're about to install a water line that's one block over from that, and the road will be closed for a little while, and we hope to be able to get our eyes on that inside of that manhole now. And we've got an annual contract for manhole repair we hope to use to recondition that manhole for sure. And then we'll start looking at some of these other manholes where force mains discharged to continue that contract. Now, then that goes, part of what we're wanting to do with that annual contract is be able to take pictures of the conditions of these manholes, the before and after pictures, so we've documented in an asset management format how we're working on our system, which requires, our mapping system to be updated just a little bit, and we've had some recent discussions with Keep Mapping System to put together a proposal for us, if you will, that'll modify the sewer system maps. That would be the first one we start with, so that we can add the attributes to those nodes or manholes and line segments, so that when we do work on those particular features, we can mark those and document the work order and the video documentation of why we did it and what we did, the before and after part of it. So it's, it takes a lot of time and obviously a lot of money, and we're trying to be judicious as we can about it. We just need to let all these pieces come together
Right.
so that we can move forward.
Yeah, exactly. And that is the other goal we have, is that even though we recognize this isn't going to get done overnight, we also
Right.
recognize that if we don't keep pushing ahead with it with a sense of urgency,
And then the
we're going to
fear-
be on time.
Then you have the fear of the development that we continue to have, come to us, and whether or not our transmission and the capacities of the lift stations that we have are able to manage much extra flow. I mean, if you look at the report, and I meant to get those numbers out, but conservatively, we're at capacity now, and when it rains, obviously, is when we have the most problem. But we need to be conscious of the fact that if we're not going to do anything, we need to think about what we shouldn't be adding, to make the problems we have worse.
Yeah.
And we're going to continue to look at that as well.
Do you have two more copies I could have?
Yes.
One for our liaison and one for
And
Paige?
this is a draft, and I've gone through, and some of
Oh, I
you'll
understand, it's
see,
a great,
you'll see some green marks that I've tried to mark on the ones that I know I'm going to make some changes on, but it's getting pretty close to where I think we can.
Yeah. What I'd like to do, if you're agreeable to it, is take maybe until maybe this time next week, Tim and I look this over and then
Sure.
huddle with you, and we'll try and get this thing moving so that at the next meeting.
And we're
we can do
setting
something
up March
definitive.
1st to distribute it,
Mhm.
and March 27th would
Yeah.
be when we receive
You wanna-
it.
Yeah, well, we want to keep this thing
Benchmark time.
moving. And
And,
that'll give us a reasonable amount of time to look at it and for you to kind of tidy it up.
Right.
We'll get together.
And I'll continue to do that.
Yeah, that's great. Perfect. I appreciate this.
Yeah, it's good
Very
work.
much.
Good
Well,
work.
you're
Thank
welcome.
you.
Well, thank y'all.
Yeah.
Very good.
It's not easy.
I know it's not easy. If it was easy, I'd do it.
No, but I'm talking about your job. I'm talking about your job.
Thank
Ready
you.
to let go?
No, thank you so much.
Yeah, that's good.
That's
Yeah,
terrific.
thank you, Rich.
Thank you. All right. You'll probably see Paige before I will.
Yeah.
If you wouldn't mind.
Sure.
Public participation.
Speak now. Forever hold your peace.
Okay. Anything else that anyone would like to bring up?
Should we talk about the police jurisdiction?
Mm-hmm.
I have information.
Oh, great.
I'm sorry I was late.
Write down her name. She was late. Write her
It
name
was at
down.
4:30, I apologize. Okay, last time you asked about the millage rates in the police jurisdiction area. In the state code of Alabama, it says we have the authority to assess and collect municipal ad valorem taxes on real and personal property located within the municipal corporate limits. It does not address the police jurisdiction. So therefore, lack of means we're unable to.
Right.
So, that was about it.
So that settles the issue. We were kind of humming and hawing, and we thought we knew, but that's,
Yeah.
appreciate that.
Yeah, and occupational tax is pretty much the only tax that we're not collecting, that we are able to collect, I think, in.
Occupational tax being, what is that?
It's on people's pay. Like if you work inside the city of Fairhope, you would pay a tax to work inside the city of Fairhope. Auburn does it. There are a couple of other municipalities in the state of Alabama that does it, that do it, but
Is that the equivalent of the local income tax?
yes, it is.
Did you find out, we had another question, remember the question about the fines and the court cost? That,
Yeah, there was
That-
not a way to, there's not a way to break it out.
but do you know what the city gets for
Well, there's,
court costs? What they?
there's a total, because it's a line item in the budget. I know there's a number for the total.
Correct.
Okay.
Do you know what the
I mean, I can tell you what it was.
yeah, or just what
For
it was last year?
Last year.
Yeah.
Give me a second, I can pull it up.
Because then when we asking if, do we get all of that? Do we get a portion of it? How much goes back to the
Yeah.
How much goes to the, I think we get all the
judicial
costs.
No.
system?
No?
We don't?
Not what I've been told.
I thought it was, we didn't get all the fine, but we got all the cost.
You get all the fine, you don't get all the cost.
See?
Just what you said, right?
This happens to me all the time.
You don't get all the fine either, do you? I thought the state got most of that.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking.
The city gets the fine.
We get all the fine. City gets 100%.
It's the court cost that is split up and
Ah,
divvied every which
okay.
way they could possibly think. It could be more than that, yeah.
So you have say you have a reckless driving fine or a DUI or something like that, then the city gets the entire portion of the DUI
Fine.
fine. Well, that's interesting to know.
Yeah. Yeah.
Do we really
guess
want to tax the people inside the city limits more since they're already subsidizing the shortfall?
No, we're just asking what the total number is.
Right, I'm just saying, when you consider things like that, those are,
Right.
things we have to talk about. Fines and forfeitures for fiscal year 2017 was right under $285,000.
Okay. But you don't have that broken out between the city limits and the police jurisdiction? Okay.
I would just like to mention that, when we're talking about the police jurisdiction, I work for the taxpayers and I work for the voters.
Mhm.
And these are the things we have to think about when we look at the police jurisdiction as a whole. And there's a lot of questions to talk about and address when we talk about the police jurisdiction, and really they weren't covered in this meeting. The shortfall right now in the taxpayers inside the city limits are subsidizing a big jurisdiction. And I think all of the data needs to be shown and presented in a way that you can see everything. And I know that we're going to carry this over, but I'm happy to help with this because this is something that I've been working on. Jennifer knows I've been trying to get this information for a long time. The other important thing to think about is the fact that when you live, and we all live in the fastest growing city in the state, and I think it's the fastest growing because of a reason. It's a very desirable place to live. One of the things that is affecting the way we're growing is the growth that's happening outside the city. And we do need to bring more of the city inside the city limits so we can control the growth and hopefully grow in a way that complements what we have and what is special. Right now, there is not a clear benefit of living inside the city limits when you're getting everything for free. You see? So part of the strategy of looking at this too is making sure that there is a clear distinction of benefits of living inside the city limits. Otherwise, we're going to face the same thing we've been facing for the last, I don't know how many years, and that is that when you look at a map of the city of Fairhope, we have about 1/3 of the city that's inside the city limits. And that portion is paying for the other 2/3. And we just can't continue that. It's not sustainable.
Well, you're talking about land area rather than population.
The population is half.
Population's
And that's
half.
where the growth is happening, is outside the city limits. Our most expensive department, and the one that is continuing to increase without the income to make it up, is the police department. So that's why, when I presented that this is one of the biggest critical things that's putting us at such a deficit, is this department, that's part of the point of talking about the jurisdiction. Again, you've got to incentivize or at least create a plan of how we want to bring in people into the city and how we want to grow the police department. And it has to be in partnership with the county because they'll have to make up, that labor. So.
Aren't there certain obstacles that it makes it very difficult to do that?
I mean,
To be able to
All
take part of that
cities look
police
at this. I
jurisdiction
mean,
and make them part of the city. Yeah.
part of this discussion needs to be what cities are exercising inside the city limits and why. Because all of them are doing it. And they're doing it for a reason. It's because it's not financially
Sure, yeah.
sustainable.
Yeah. No, I get that. I just thought there were some, I don't know whether it was state laws,
No.
rules that governed how that was done.
The police jurisdiction is up to the city.
No, but the only thing you're doing, unless the people that are outside the city limits join the city,
You can't force it.
You can't
right?
force them.
We
No, you
can't
can't,
force
but you
them.
can at least say, this year we're gonna look at this for this reason and basically allow them to make that decision in a communicated way. That's why I wanna look at it this way. It's not gonna be done in a strong arm way. It's gonna be done in a way that this is where we are as a city. This is where we are financially. I mean, we don't have enough police officers right now to patrol the jurisdiction that we have. And I explained that in my presentation as well. So therefore, the ones that are paying the lion's share of this don't get the services that they should be getting. And those are the people that I work for, and those are the people that have to see that benefit. And everybody can have that benefit. But if you decide not to be a part of it, then at least there's a clear distinction of the benefits of living inside and outside the city. You're giving them a choice.
One of the arguments there is if you reduce the size of the police, take away the police jurisdiction, that criminal element's gonna get closer to the city of Fairhope.
That's why you have an agreement with the county and you do it in a planned way. The cities are doing this. We're not reinventing the wheel here. This is how you can absolutely do that. We do that with our fire department. I mean, there is a plan. We don't just ignore it and say it's too complicated, when it is one of the biggest financial burdens to the city. We have to make a plan.
So if the jurisdiction were shrunk down to the city limits, then how much money would you cut out of the police department's budget?
You're not going to cut anything, because the size of our police department right now is the size it needs to be to police inside the city limits. That is our shortfall. You know, you have the decision is 3 miles, 1 mile, or inside the city limits. Right now, we're 3 miles out. So it might start with 1 mile, I don't know. I'm just saying that, you know, we can look at all of these plans, but you do it now because it needs to be communicated with the county by this summer, because they have to put it in their budget for their fiscal year, which is the same as ours. I've already started the communication with them, you know, and they know that this is something that's, you know,
So
a big deal here.
Just to continue my thought then, if you're saying you're not gonna cut any money out, then what you're gonna do is, after you shrink the police jurisdiction, is effectively raise the amount of money that people inside the city pay for police protection by $1.3 million.
No, because 40% of their time and expenses is spent outside the city limits.
When you're mixing apples and oranges, what I'm saying is that if you're not going to cut any cost out of the police department, but
You would be
you're
cutting the
but
cost,
you're-
I'm sorry,
well,
the
you told me
40%.
you weren't.
I thought you meant like payroll and things like that. By reducing that's why I want to give you the data that I have. So you
Well,
can
we-
see,
Yeah.
you know, that.
We have the data, and we discussed it at length in the last meeting, and it was on the agenda, and we worked with what we had. But my question to you, my question.
I'm very busy, so unless somebody's going to ask me to be a part of it and answer questions, yeah, I think I was out of town last time y'all had a meeting. But on this, she's giving you information on revenue, and the police department put together the information on the expenses.
Well, this question is based on what you just told me, which is, if we cut the police jurisdiction down, you're not gonna cut any money out of the budget, which says that you're gonna lose $1.3 million of revenue. It's now being paid by people in the PJ, not in the city, and that 1.3 million is now gonna have to be made up by the people who live in the city. So
Right.
you are
Well-
going to increase
No,
the city's cost by $1.3 million.
I
the
misunderstood
citizens'
your
cost.
question, and that is, there is 40% of our time and expenses paid outside the city.
So you're gonna cut 40% out of the police department budget?
It wouldn't be exactly that, because you have to understand, we are working right now with a limited staff as it is. It's not just about cutting expenses, it's about increasing services for those that
That's
are
my
paying
question.
for it.
That's my question, is whether or not you're gonna cut any money out of the police budget if you shrunk the PJ. What is your intention?
My intention is to get all of the information. And we don't have all of the information right now, today. While y'all are meeting on this, outside of me, I'm doing other things too. I want to be included in this conversation. And it's not like these meetings are done around my schedule. I try to come to every single one that I have time for. But, you know, this is
So-
something that has to be communicated, I have to be
So,
included.
All right, hearing all of that, but I still am not hearing the answer to my question. which
I said we
is-
don't have all of the information now. I can't give you answers on, when we don't have all of the information to answer that.
Okay.
Can I ask a question? On the 40% that you said that was outside, how's that calculated?
I'll bring it up. This is from the police department, like I I said, this
Do
is.
they keep hours of time they spent out in the police jurisdiction? Because they told me they didn't. No.
This is what, like I said, Lieutenant Hamrick put together for me, and this is something that we're going to keep better track of, but none of this data was ever looked at or asked for until I took office. So, I mean, we're putting it together now in ways that, with the information and tools that we have,
Okay.
okay? So.
Well, one thing you need to know is you need to know your cost separation
Absolutely.
from an hourly wage standpoint and hours spent out in the police jurisdiction, an hour spent in the police jurisdiction, before you can ever get a cost situation that it is how it deflects to the police department. If you don't have those exact numbers, then you're just guessing at what those numbers are. So how many hours are we spending per day in the police jurisdiction? Not only how many hours, how many miles we're driving, et cetera,
Right.
because
But-
those are all
but
true costs.
These are great questions and
Yeah.
things that have to be asked
Yeah.
before any decision moves forward.
Right.
I mean, I wish I had all of the answers. Believe me, I'm trying to gather as much information daily, not just on this, but everything that we're working on. And
From
this is
what
critical.
what we could gather, just in the amount of information that we did get, and we didn't get all the numbers that you looked at, but what we can gather is that there's no way you can make up for that $1.3 million that's coming in from the police jurisdiction with the difference in cost, and that you can, where you can reduce that much out of the police department. The numbers won't work.
It absolutely will. I mean, because it's not just about, it's also about service.
Yeah.
For the people inside the city limits.
Okay.
And you also, if you look at, we're at a 3-mile, jurisdiction. If you look at a 1 mile, that's probably more the concentration of money. I mean, we have to look at all of the data. We're not anywhere close to comparing anything and getting all of the information. I've just presented what I've gotten thus far.
Okay.
And I would love to have help to fill in the holes, but y'all don't have to spend a lot of time reinventing what I've done. I want to work with
Yeah.
you to get this information, and it's very important to taxpayers to get this information, ask the right questions. I don't have all the answers, and I haven't been able to do all the work yet. But there still is a lot to consider, and, that there's also ways as a jurisdiction that we can annex businesses legislatively to get the 2% sales tax, because Daphne did that. In fact, I want to use, and Richard Johnson has a lot of tools and information and suggestions to talk about how you plan a police jurisdiction, because he was involved with Daphne's plan.
Well, I'd sure like to see those numbers too, because was it last meeting when I forgot the officer that was here? We were asking him some of these same questions, and he, at least in my mind, he made it pretty clear that very little extra time was spent.
Who did you talk to?
Who was, I can't remember. Do you remember who that was?
No.
It was Lieutenant Hammer.
Okay, well, I mean,
Okay.
he put these figures together.
Did I miss that? Or
No, I mean, that was.
isn't that what he said?
I went and talked to the police chief and those guys, and just getting the general consensus of, the service that the police department services the police jurisdiction and the city with. And they told me that very little of their time was spent in police jurisdiction.
You have to understand, we can't do it by opinions.
Yeah, I understand.
Data doesn't
Well, yeah,
lie.
that's
Yeah.
my point.
Yeah.
Okay, so
I'd like to see the
we have to
numbers,
see
too.
data. And
Because if
you
you're
can
gonna-
interview and all of these things, and I have been doing that too, but I can't go by, and we shouldn't go by opinions. We have to go by all of the finances, all of the data, and this is about Fairhope's future and the way we're growing. I mean, I hope you can agree in the end, it is about how we grow. That's one of the most important things and the only reason I ran. You know, I'm taking off basically my life to do this for 4 years, and this is what it's about. It's about making sure we grow in a way that keeps what Fairhope is special. That's the bigger picture. And that's what we always have to take to heart when we address big issues like this. And you really can't argue with data.
Now, when you speak of growth, the growth in the police jurisdiction is monitored by the city of Fairhope.
I'm not sure I understand what you're saying.
You have a building department
Right.
that monitors growth within the police jurisdiction. They have
It's
to
actually the
submit.
planning jurisdiction,
Yeah.
which is larger than the police jurisdiction. And that has, like I said, nothing to do with income. I mean, you don't have to annex in
Well,
when you
they
have property.
they derive income from the police jurisdiction because the planning department does, because they charge a fee to put up a building or whatever else, and from what I can gather, that fee was about $260,000 last year.
Right. All of
Now,
that, like I said.
what
was
what
laid
if you
out.
don't have a police jurisdiction? That goes away.
I know. But it is about a $6 million department. If you have, it was like $1.2 million, I think, in 2016, and a little bit above that in 2017, income. And you have, let's just say, 40% expense. The expense exceeds the revenue. Now, it doesn't exactly, because there's certain things that as you grow, you don't have to get another chief and you don't have to get administrative, but we do have to look at just all the facts, and we don't have them right now. So,
Yeah.
we do need to get the group together that can get all of this data and put it together and ask the right questions, because I think there's a lot more questions that we're not even thinking of at this table.
Well, if you're speaking just of the police jurisdiction, I mean, the police department by itself, then you have to have a breakdown of hours spent and the cost of those hours that are directly related to the police jurisdiction. And those have to be pure numbers. And the city limits too. So you have to have that cost breakdown.
You're looking at expenses right now.
Mhm.
I went over data on how many police officers we need per 1,000 in population, based on it was an FBI report.
Yeah, 2.7, I
Right,
think.
so you're looking at expenses based on where we are right now. That's not taking in consideration that we need 34 more police officers. We might not need that. I'm just saying statistics, based on population, we need way more. So the expenses you're looking at right now are just the expenses that for inside the city limits. If we're gonna police and do it right for 3 Mile police jurisdiction, those expenses are not even in front of us right now. It's way higher than what we have right now. Because we would have to add a lot more police to our police force. Based on almost, it's over 32,000 people in our police jurisdiction. And we are staffed for 19,000. So the expenses we're talking
Yeah,
about is not
those are strictly just numbers based.
on the most
On-
recent
on-
census report, which was last year.
That's not I don't get that same, when I talk to the police people, I don't know what their agenda is, but I don't get that same, they say they have enough people to cover.
You're just doing it on an opinion.
I know, but I'm just saying, that's their opinion. It's not based on some federal guideline.
I know, but I could say, that's to say an opinion on anything with the city, and making decisions on opinions is not good for taxpayers. We have to have data. You can't have a motion with statistics. Let's just get the facts.
Well, let me ask you this, if the guys in charge of the police department says, I got 37 officers, but I can run the same job with 25. What's best for the taxpayer?
You're giving a hypothetical that we
But-
already know that, and I think.
But he says, I got 12 officers I don't need.
But he's not saying that.
But
I mean,
what I'm doing,
we put more people in the budget, and even those people, some of those people were cut, so that's not the situation. You're giving a hypothetical that's not true.
well, you're making an argument that based on a federal guideline, we need more police officers.
But at least I'm giving data based on studies.
I know, but if he's saying, I don't need those people, we don't have that lawlessness around here. I mean, we can get by with 25. So what's better for the citizens? To have 25 and be secure, or 37 and pay more money?
Okay.
I'm just, you have to use the resources.
I'm laughing only because this is just, my background is finance. I deal in numbers, statistics, and facts. That's how I make decisions. I don't make decisions by emotion about an opinion of somebody that doesn't have the information to quantify. You know, I base my decisions on facts.
But he's living it every day. He's there every day.
You're asking someone who is doing a job, okay, and then there's other experience and qualifications to make decisions in another area. I mean,
Are you making the case, I mean, to me, the statistic, the average, whatever it is, 2.7 from the FBI is, you know, it's an
Nationwide.
average- It's an
2.2.
average, and
Yeah.
it includes
New York City.
high crime areas, low
Yeah.
crime areas,
Yeah.
farmland, urban settings, the whole 9 yards. So whether or not, based on a whole bunch of criteria, we should be at the average or above it or below it, to me, maybe not a worthless statistic, but the next thing to it, because it doesn't describe our situation. I guess the question Will is trying to ask is this, is that if your police chief says that, all things considered, he's getting along okay, and yeah, he could use 1 or 2 more patrolmen, or he could use 2 more cars or whatever, but he's not crying wolf right now. And unless you could demonstrate that he's full of beans and that there's this crime wave in Fairhope that he's ignoring, then why would you just go out and add police officers so you can get up to the average? I mean, is there a crime wave going on we're not aware of, where the policing is so bad that we're all at risk?
I feel like this is it's just the oddest questioning to make decisions on. I mean, yes, we want to keep Fairhope safe. I get the police report every single day.
Is it not safe now? Is it your opinion?
We want to keep it, we want to plan for its future.
I'm talking about right
financially
now,
and-
today, in the context of if, I don't know what our number is.
Well,
If
we
we're at
are slipping.
if
Our
we're at
stats are
1
slipping.
If we're at 1.9 and the average is 2.7, the question we're trying to get to is, from a justification, you want to talk numbers, from an economic justification standpoint, unless you can demonstrate that we've got a serious deficiency in our safety and security that's being ignored by the police department, then I can't see spending a whole bunch of money just to spend the money to get up to the average if there's not an obvious need. To me, the average doesn't mean much. I'm more concerned about whether the guy who's running the police department thinks we're doing an adequate job or not, and he seems to think that.
Right, but have you gotten the data that shows that information?
Can you, well...
That's what I'm saying. I mean, that's what we have to do.
I'll turn it around to you. Can you demonstrate to me that there's some sort of a crime wave sweeping over Fairhope that's not being addressed? You're the one with the numbers. Can you demonstrate that?
I don't have all of the numbers.
And I think
I mean-
that's one of the important things is to get all the numbers. It might take more than 6 months to gather numbers. See, this has never been done before. The city has never done this before. They've always accepted that we've got a police jurisdiction, and without really knowing what the cost was for the police jurisdiction. So if you don't have, like I said before, if you don't have hours and manpower and gasoline and the number of cars it takes to patrol the police jurisdiction, and you can say, okay, that's 20% of our cost, 80% of our cost is in the city of Fairhope. Okay, then how much revenue are we getting in the police jurisdiction if we cut off the police jurisdiction? I mean, if we cut off police protection, if we just get back to the city limits, how much revenue are we missing? And how much of that revenue is the 20%?
Should we just agree now that we want to get more information?
Sure,
I think that's the bottom line.
sure.
I don't think we can argue with needing more information and bringing more people, including citizens, to ask questions about how this would affect them. And, you know, their services and how it would affect the police department financially. But it's not about just today, it's about growth. We've got a plan for this unparalleled growth. We can't look at something just for today without having a plan when we are the fastest growing city.
Well, part of the plan needs to be, okay, if we're growing that fast, then where are we going to create revenue to pay for the expenses?
You have to get more contribution. I think you would agree that the only way you get more revenue is to get more people contributing to that pot. And the only way, not the only way, but one of the big ways is to get people to annex in. You're not going to look at all of Fairhope, but you need to identify an area.
What if you don't get the people to annex in?
It's their choice. That's what I'm saying.
But what if they don't?
Then that's when you say, this is our plan, and this is how we're going to grow, this is how we can keep financially sustainable. And if you choose not to be in, it's your choice, but understand that we're going to rein in the police jurisdiction. That, if you don't incentivize it, then you're never going to get
Let's look.
it done, you know?
Let's look at facts. Fact one is now that we got a police jurisdiction. They pay a certain percentage of revenue to the city. That's 1% of the sales tax or whatever it is. I don't know what the revenue source is there.
If you live inside the city, what you would pay, the sales tax income, you know, everybody contributes to that because that's a user tax. The city property taxes, the 15 mills, is only paid by the people who live inside the city.
Okay,
limits.
but you do get revenue from the police jurisdiction.
No, not for property taxes.
Not for property taxes, no,
I'm
but
just
other
talking
revenues,
about
other
property
Due
revenues,
for sales tax, isn't it?
other
One
revenues.
1%.
One half of whatever we pay.
Right.
as a-
And you get all the revenues, you get the fines and.
But you're not getting as much revenue as you would need to have both a police department that can do that big of an area. Because that's time consuming. We're talking about 2/3 of our area.
But
you know,
you don't know, you don't have all the numbers yet. You're-
I can look at the map. I'm just talking
No, no,
about
you-
what's inside the city limits.
I know, but
the area and
I'm
what's outside.
looking at strictly numbers.
We're not
Strict-
looking at any numbers because we
I
don't
know,
have
but
any numbers yet.
Strictly numbers, if you're looking at numbers.
need to get the numbers.
We have to have all the numbers before you can make an
That's all.
educated
We can
decision.
agree on that. Let's
So-
get all the numbers.
So if you're playing what ifs, you have this revenue source now within the police jurisdiction, right?
What now?
You got a revenue source within the police jurisdiction where it exists today,
Right.
okay? So if you take all that off, you eliminate that, and then you have no revenue source.
You don't have, let me just pull up what I had for the.
No, I'm-
the,
So if you cut off the revenue source, you don't have any revenue source. And you're assuming,
You're not cutting off revenue sources. Most of your income comes from inside the city limits. You're not gonna cut that off.
you're cutting the revenue source you get from the police jurisdiction.
the police jurisdiction includes
Oh, yeah,
inside the city limits and outside the city
right,
limits.
right.
The area inside the city limits is where the lion's share of the income comes.
80%. We figured that out, 80%.
So what we're stating, when you only have 1/3 of the area that's inside the city limits, and a police department has to patrol 3 times more of an area than that.
I understand all
That's
that.
what I'm saying. We just have to get the numbers.
I understand
We
that.
don't
Okay,
have
well,
to
let's-
argue with something we don't have all the facts yet.
Okay, you got the numbers, and you're gonna say, okay, 20% of our revenue comes from police jurisdiction,
From outside the city limits.
outside the city
Because the
limits.
police jurisdiction includes inside the city
Okay,
limits.
outside the city limits. Then you got to say, okay, we're gonna cut that off and hope these people come inside the city limits. Or
We won't.
elect to come into the
communicated.
city limits of Fairhope and pay the extra revenue that it takes to be in the city limits of Fairhope. What if that doesn't happen?
At least it'll be a choice, and it will be defined as a benefit for living inside.
What
the
if
city
it doesn't
limits.
happen? Give me the,
Then you do it
the
in
bare facts.
communication and partnership with the sheriff's department, so they can grow their number of people who patrol the county. And we also do it in partnership with them.
But that-
So there's no, I don't know the terminology, but you can do a partnership where we, just like our fire department, we go out and meet Barnwell. I mean, we don't want loss of life or anybody, you can have that memorandum of understanding. Cities do it
okay,
all
now,
the time.
let's look at the pluses and the minuses. You got 1 point some million dollars coming in from outside the city limits
I
now.
think it's about 1.3.
Yeah, 1.3. And then, of course, you got other sources there too that you haven't included in that 1.3.
is just outside the city limits.
But that didn't include fines and building department.
That includes building
It
department.
does revenue?
The income from, all the income from outside the city
Okay.
limits is what you gave me.
Minus the fines, because
Okay.
we have no way to pay
Right.
that.
Well, that, I think Lieutenant Hamrick came in and showed what that was,
Okay.
which I'm trying to find.
I'm just making this, trying to say it's 1.3. So you say, okay, we're giving that income up. We're not going to service that area anymore. So you eliminate $1.3 million worth of revenue. Where do you make that up inside the city limits?
I just
Do you
explained,
cut-
I
do
just
you cut
explained that
cost?
the expenses that you have right now are not where we even, we need to have a bigger police department to police 32,500 people. Now, we can say.
Based on what?
I know.
Based on what do you need more?
We're basing it on the data that is available. I mean, I'd rather base it on data
You're
than
basing-
base it on an opinion.
You're basing it on an average that covers everything from soup to nuts, 2.7.
So
Yeah.
what would
That's
you
not-
rather use, an opinion?
I'd rather.
I'd rather use
guy
experience.
Patrolling the streets every day, tell me if he's got enough help or not, which right now,
So we're
Although
not,
they
we're
could use-
discounting everything to do with also managing growth and incentivizing. Do you think that we will ever have more income so the people inside the city limits are not subsidizing services for a greater portion of Fairhope, okay? Because that is what taxpayers are doing right now. The voters are
well,
paying more.
you're assuming that, but there's no fact and
Yeah.
evidence to support that because
It
you
is
don't.
absolutely facts
No,
and
no, no.
evidence.
You don't have any statistics that show how much of the time and the mileage of the police department is actually spent inside the city limits compared to outside.
There's
You're looking
only
at
a
map.
group of
You're-
people
you're
inside
look-
the city limits.
You're looking at a map and you're saying, well, this PJ is so much bigger than the city, it must be, so much, but it's.
But according to the police
But we don't
department.
have numbers that
Yeah.
support that.
But according to the police department, they hardly spend any time in the PJ.
Yeah.
All their time is spent in the city limits. That's
I mean,
where all
Like I
the-
said, I don't know if we're gonna be able to accomplish much more without getting all of the data.
Well,
I mean,
you-
it's just,
You definitely need the data, but it's gonna take you a longer period of time to accumulate the data because it's never been done before. You got to figure out what it's gonna cost you over a year period of time of how much money you're spending, how many hours, how much patrol time, how much car cost is in the police jurisdiction versus the city limits. And that's got to come from the police department. It's got to be broken down
Absolutely.
on a yearly basis. They've never done that before.
I mean, I started this process last year,
Yeah.
and I know that none of these questions have been asked. That's why I want to get all of the information so we can plan Fairhope's future.
So it's probably gonna be another year or two before we have enough data to be able to make any
I
kind
mean,
of
that's-
educated
It's not gonna take that long to get it.
don't think. Okay.
Well, I
And the
can,
thing is you
It
gotta.
may
I-
not take that long to get started, but I certainly wouldn't want to make a decision based on 1 or 2 months' worth of data. I mean, this
No,
has to run
I'm not
its course.
saying that at all.
I'm gonna go out on a limb and say, you're not gonna save anything. Just looking at the preliminary stuff that I had to look at. Now, I could be completely wrong.
But what I'm trying to explain is the savings that you have, it's also about services and growth. We're
You're-
not talking about today, we're trying to talk about 4 years, 10 years, 15 years. We have to, there are cities all over, all kinds of municipalities that make this decision based on the future.
Well, then,
And you have to understand that the biggest income is property taxes. That's the biggest income that pays for our police department. There's only people inside the city limits that are paying into that.
I understand that. But I don't think cutting the police jurisdiction,
The
I mean, the police
jurisdiction-
department.
The
But
police
the police-
jurisdiction
I think-
includes
I think-
another huge, 3 times that area, and
So-
we're not getting any income
so
from that city
what you're saying is the only
property tax.
solution is to cut these people off of.
You give them a
of-
choice. You're
I
not
can
gonna
tell you,
cut them off.
I can tell you what their choice is gonna be right now.
How do you know? I've talked to these people, and
Okay.
people, when you rein in a police jurisdiction, insurance costs more because you have a defined area that is within a police jurisdiction. Oftentimes, insurance on the value of your home far exceeds whatever you would pay in millage. But at least you're getting that contribution to fund a very important department that needs not just more personnel, but more resources.
But.
I mean,
well,
I
don't
want to
understand.
tell you, we're in the 21st century. We need a forensic lab. We have to contract labor when it comes to computer and cell phones and things like this. These are things that our police department needs to have the tools to fight crime we have to have all these things, and it costs money.
There'd be another number to look at. What's the cost of my insurance gonna go up?
But that
If,
is.
if I go into the city, to the
It'll go
city.
down.
It'll go down. Not significantly.
It-
So what-
it-
you
it
already
can be
provide-
reined
you
in.
already provide fire
You have to
protection.
rein it in first before there's a distinction between living inside the city limits and living outside the city limits. There's no distinction right now because the police jurisdiction pretty much covers all of Fairhope. If you take in the police jurisdiction, those who live outside the city limits, that's where your insurance will be defined based on, you're not in a police
Well,
jurisdiction.
then you need to get that number, and I guarantee you,
I don't have to get that number.
you know,
I'm.
you gotta have a comparison.
Why, that amount that their insurance would go up in the county, these are not, why would I need to get that information?
Because it's gonna formulate in their decision where to come
I
in
know,
the
I
city. or
mean,
not.
I think that that's definitely something we can communicate, but.
If it's
this
gonna
is
cost,
not
if it's gonna
an
cost them an
exact
extra
amount.
$20 a month for insurance.
It depends on the value of your home, what insurance company you go with. I mean, there's a lot of variables.
But the only thing you're providing from an insurance standpoint is police. That's not gonna be much of your insurance. Your insurance is all, your insurance is all fire, all wind, and.
It's also based
theft.
on the rating, the safety rating, which includes a police jurisdiction. And I don't know exactly how much, I was told this, I have not verified it, but I have heard that your property insurance can go up significantly if you're not within a police jurisdiction.
I'm gonna get you that number.
But it would be a variable.
I'll get you that number.
You know, different
It's not-
insurance companies
it's not-
have different.
It's not significant,
Okay, Will,
yeah.
I think we'll pretty well talk this thing through. What is your desire on how to proceed? What do you
Well,
want to do next?
I'd like to get, I'd like to get more numbers if, to make a bona fide recommendation.
Okay, and so would part of that include seeing what numbers, the additional numbers the mayor has access to?
Yes.
that we don't? So would you?
There's a lot that we still have to get, but yes.
So well, to the extent you have things we haven't seen, we'd like to
Right.
see them. So
Mhm.
would you and Paige
Sure.
follow up on that, and then we'll see where we are at the next meeting?
Listen, I want to do what's best for the city of Fairhope.
That's all I want to.
Yeah. And I understand your concern about growth, but that, somehow, that revenue from growth has got to come from somewhere. And you can't,
Where
you
do you think the
can't,
growth is happening?
where I think it's probably out in the police jurisdiction. Well, I don't know, it's probably,
The police jurisdiction includes those inside the city limits and those outside the city
He meant
limits.
the PJ outside of the city
Yeah.
limits.
Yeah.
outside the
But
city
what I'm
limits.
saying.
isn't it
That's not
also,
what's
isn't it
contributing
also
to
the case that most of that growth, population, is coming from group developments rather than individual homes?
I would say so.
Yeah.
And isn't it also the case that a large number of those developments, when they come in, they annex into the city? So
Yes.
they are coming in. So a
Well,
lot of that.
If they're coming in after the fact, they're not paying impact fees, and 1%
that-
of that development,
a lot of
a
that
percentage
growth-
of that does go
A lot of
to
that growth, we are in fact getting
property
considerable
taxes.
revenue from it
Mhm.
because they are annexing themselves in.
Mhm.
So, to me, PJ is sort of filling up with people in the city because more and more of that land outside the city but inside the PJ is, that's where the growth is, that's where the developments are coming in. Those are the people who are annexing themselves in. We don't necessarily care about one individual homeowner, whether he annexes it or not, but the development where you have all that concentration of people.
Something else, another income I want to mention is the 1% impact fee. The only development that develops inside the city limits pays that. And that 1%, a portion of it goes to emergency management, fire and police, streets, Parks and Rec, and transportation.
Okay,
So, but the police is the smallest amount of that whole 1%. It's like a little over 3%. So I have ordered, and it was approved, and we're in the middle of this process. It's been 10 years since we have done a study on the impact fee and how that money is distributed, that 1% in those buckets, because I feel police needs to get more. And when we finish with that study, which hopefully will be in the next month, that will be more income.
can you change the rules on your subdivisions? They
Well, the
have to be in the city of city
Well,
limits?
we are doing that now because we're putting in incentives for developing, we need that money. So we're trying to, incentivize that, them coming into the city to develop. We have ideas to either, if they develop outside the city limits, building in that revenue in our utility, like cap fees and things like that. Cities do that. I mean, you have to pay for it
If
one
you-
way or another, but.
Somehow, if I was in charge of that, I'd say, okay, you gotta be in the city limits before we
Well,
can rule on where you can build anything.
To do that, though, you have to have legal steps to do that. We're looking at all of those things. And it's absolutely necessary, because like I said, the impact fee is absolutely necessary. It only offsets the cost of our infrastructure.
Yeah.
And
Gotta have
it
that.
doesn't include schools, because we're on county schools, and that impact fee only affects a municipal. And I asked the county to do the impact fee study just on the county portion for the schools, so the municipalities that do charge an impact fee could use that portion or that data to include schools. I know we're getting off the subject, but that hasn't happened yet. It's something that I would like to see, because that's another way that we can get money for the schools. So hopefully we'll have that information very, very soon.
Okay, good.
Be good.
We are adjourned. Thank you very much.
Okay.
Appreciate it.